the Imams had received. In this letter, he received questions, and the Imam responded to his companion in a letter. And this letter, our scholars used to derive certain rulings for us to follow. The letter which I want to talk about today, actually talk about one part of that letter, is a letter which the Imam sent to his companions personally. You know, at the time of the Imam, the 6th Imam, there was knowledge that was spread. The Shias, Ithna Ashari Shias, are known as Ja'faris because during the time of the 6th Imam, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the teachings of Ahlul Bayt were spread to everybody. That was the time where the Umayyads lost power and the Abbasids were taking power. There was a struggle between these two empires and powers. So there was time while they were fighting where the Imam was able to begin and teach and spread his teachings to the people. That's why if you look at Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, his teachings not only are given to the Shia. A lot of the Sunni heads of the madhabs studied under the Imam as well. They say that under him were thousands and thousands of students. They were Shias, they were Sunnis, they were from all different sects. So the Imam, on top of teaching the masses, he had a select group of followers. And he sent them a letter. And in this letter, he asked them to read the letter, and not only read it, but to also study it, and to look into it. And I'm going to read a portion of the teachings that the Imam had given, and we're going to go over a point or two. The letter is found in Al-Rawda, Kitab, the book of Al-Rawda, which means the garden. This book is the last book of the collection of Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi means the sufficient. Shaykh al-Kulayni wrote this book where he gathered the ahadith of the Imams, and he called it Al-Kafi because whoever reads this book is sufficient for him to follow and to be a follower of Ahlul Bayt. So in this letter, in this book, this collection, at the beginning we have the fundamentals, Usul al-Kafi, which talk about Tawheed, about the Imams, about ethics, about things related to the resurrection and life. And then we have Furu' al-Kafi after it, which is the branches of al-Kafi related to rulings and legislations. And then we have Al-Rawda, the garden, which is the last volume. And in this volume, there's a collection of things that are like guidance to people. Anything that doesn't fall under those categories. In Al-Rawda, the first hadith is narrated from an individual called Ismail bin Makhlad as-Sarraj. An Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, he narrates from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, saying, خرجت هذه الرسالة من أبي عبد الله إلى أصحابه. This man, Ismail, says that the Imam wrote this letter to his companions. And he says that he told his companions to study this letter and to contemplate it. أمرهم بمدارستها والنظر فيها وتعاهدها. Ta'ahud means to revisit it or to follow the teachings of it. So not only were they supposed to read this letter one time, they were supposed to revisit this letter over and over again because the nature of this letter is that it gives us a guideline of how to live our lives. It's not a letter where the Imam gives them one commandment for them to follow and apply in their lives. No. He's ordering them to read this letter over and over again. So basically, it's a guideline that the Imam is giving them to follow in this life. وَالْعَمَلِ بِهَا. Not only do they revisit this letter, but to apply it in their lives as well. فَكَانُوا يَضَعُونَهَا فِي مَسَاجِدِ بُيُوتِهِمْ. The narrator says that the companions used to take this letter and put it in the masjids in their homes. The Muslims at that time, they had a prayer room in their homes. And this is something that we have to also try to have in our daily lives or our houses over here. To have a room that's dedicated only for salat, only for dua, a meditation room, a prayer room. This is how the Muslims used to be. They had a room that was separate from the rest of the house. And this is very important for us to have. Because in our house, The house is a reflection of ourselves, for our comfort, for our bodily needs, right? We have a bedroom because our body needs to sleep and rest. We have a kitchen because we need to cook for ourselves in order to eat for our bodies. We have a living room to spend time with our friends and families and watch TV and do things for us, for entertainment. So everything in the house basically serves a purpose of the outside aspect of the human being. We need a room in the house that allows us to leave the outside and go back to the inside, to disconnect from the outside and to look internally, to find our souls, to meditate on our souls, to pray. And this room should not be a reflection of the outside. Nothing in this room should reflect our personality. It should be a room that's dedicated to the divine, so that when you go in that room, you forget yourself and you focus on your soul. If you go to the bedroom, you have a bed over there. The bed reminds you of sleeping, of resting, right? In the living room or the bedroom, you have pictures of your family, of your friends. You have things that relate to whatever activity or what that room is dedicated for. It's a distraction. You need a room that only reminds you of God and Ahlul Bayt and your spirituality. In that room, you have Quran, you have Mafatihul Jinan for dua, you have things related to that. You have the divine names, you have the Imam's names, and you dedicate it only to that. So these companions took this letter and put it in that room in their house. Everybody copied the letter. They put it in the room in their house. فَإِذَا فَرَغُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ نَظَرُوا فِيهَا. As soon as they finished their salat, they would take that letter and they would read it. This is how dedicated they were to it, and this is how they treated it as a guideline and program for them to follow in their lives. So the letter begins like this. The Imam says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Amma ba'd, fas'alu rabbakum al-afiyah. He says, ask from your Lord to give you well-being. The first thing that the Imam tells them in the letter is to ask for well-being. Now the Imam, we know that the Imams don't speak randomly to people. Everything they say is calculated. Everything they say has a specific purpose to be said. Why from all the prayers and du'as, the Imam in this letter, which is a guideline and a program for his followers, told them to ask their Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for well-being? Well, this prompts us to look at the ahadith that talk about well-being, to see what the Imams mean by well-being. Why is well-being so important that the Imam chose this specific dua and prayer over all other requests that he could have made? He could have said that, ask from Allah to give you a long life. That could have been an option. Ask Allah to give you happiness. Ask Allah to give you wealth. There are millions of different types of du'as the Imam could have chose. But he chose specifically to ask for well-being. This is what I want to talk about briefly tonight, inshallah, to go over the idea of well-being and to see if we can discover the mentality that the Imams wanted us to have as their followers. So well-being is an important thing. In Arabic, we refer to it as al-afiyah. A hadith by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa He says, بِالْعَافِيَةِ تُوجَدُ لَذَّةُ الْحَيَاةِ. The pleasure of life is found in well-being. If a person is in a state of well-being, then you're able to experience life in the most pleasurable way. This is very important. The Imams want their followers to be able to experience a life that is not a life of misery, not a life of suffering, not a life of hardship, not a life of difficulty. They want us to be able to have enjoyment of this life. And the enjoyment is acquired by having well-being in our lives. This is the state that we have to be seeking and going after. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us on this earth, and He created this earth in order for His creatures to enjoy it. God didn't put us here to suffer. He didn't put us here to be miserable. He didn't put us here to be people who are negative and always going through difficulties and problems. Life is supposed to be enjoying. We're supposed to be enjoying life in a way. Of course, within the limits that Islam teaches us. But in general, the attitude towards life is a positive attitude that we're supposed to have. Some people think that because we are in dunya is a very bad thing and we have to curse it, we have to talk bad about it, we have to reject it, we have to be so in a sort of way, we have like an animosity towards the dunya. Whereas our Imams, his attitude was not like that. They said that, this is this dunya, and there's a famous hadith where the Imam passes by someone who was cursing the dunya. And the Imam replies to him and says, you who's cursing the dunya, is it the dunya that harmed you, or is it you who harmed yourself? The dunya is not doing anything to you. You are the one who is using the dunya in a bad way. It's as if somebody, goes to commit a certain sin with his or her body, for example, and then curses that thing. And then the reality is that it's the person who committed the sin, not the object. The dunya is objective. It doesn't do anything. It's there. God created it. It has trees, it has mountains, it has water, it's a universe, there's planets. They're doing their own thing. The dunya in itself is not a bad thing. It's not an evil thing. But in this dunya, in this world, we're able to do bad things and we're able to do good things. So in reality, the subject, the person, is responsible for the goodness or the badness in the dunya, not the dunya itself. So going back to al-afiyah, the Imam tells them to ask for al-afiyah in their life. Now let's look at another hadith. This is a very interesting hadith that I really thought is worth contemplating over. Imam Rida alayhi salam says that there was a man who passed by Ali ibn Hussein alayhi salam. Imam al-Sajjad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Or the other way around. The Imam was walking and he passed by a man standing, and this man was praying, asking Allah to give him patience. Ya Allah, give me sabr, give me patience. So the Imam stopped and he looked at him and he said, don't say this. Don't say, oh Allah, give me patience. But ask Allah for afiyah, ask Him for well-being. Wa shukr ala al-afiyah, and thank Him, or thankfulness for well-being. فَإِنَّ شُكْرَ عَلَى الْعَافِيَةِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الصَّبْرِ عَلَى الْبَلَاءِ. Being thankful for well-being is better than being patient over difficulties and tribulations. If you had to choose one between the other, either I go through difficulties and be patient, or no difficulties and thank Allah for that, which one's better? The second one. To not have these difficulties, to not have these miseries, and thank Allah is better than having difficulties and miseries and being patient over it. Then the Imam says, كَانَ دُعَاءُ النَّبِي. He says the Prophet used to pray this dua. اللهم إني أسألك العافية والشكر على العافية وتمام العافية في الدنيا والآخرة. Oh Allah, I ask you for well-being and thankfulness for well-being and the perfection of well-being in this world and the hereafter. This is the teachings that the Imams are trying to instill inside of us. A lot of people think if I'm a believer, I have to suffer. I have to be miserable. But a lot of the times the misery comes from our own hands. A person who always thinks that there's going to be negativity in his or her life invites those things over. Because we don't perfect ourselves or we don't work on improving our lives, we go through difficulties and miseries. That's not because we're believers that we're going through this. There are some shortcomings that we have that we have to overcome, otherwise we will suffer. So for example, the mu'mineen, when they want to open centers or they want to have an invitation, for example, in certain cultures, people are known not to be on time, for example. You invite people at 6 o'clock and they come at 8 o'clock. That's the beginning, 2 hours. 2 hours of life was wasted in a sense. Then the program is late, and then people stay over, then the next day you go to work, you're tired, and you say, Ya Allah, I'm going through difficulty because of my iman. I'm a mu'min and Allah is putting test for me. That's why I'm sleepy and that's why I can't go to work energized. But in reality, it's not because of that. It's better for you to be on time, to have the program, to sleep early, to get up for work energized, and thank Allah for giving you this ability to do that, and giving you a new life in the morning, and giving you a mind that allowed you to plan like this to be energized. That's much better than suffering and then saying, Allah, give me sabr today to let this day pass without trouble. You go to work and you have to drink the Red Bull and everything, and you pray to Allah, and give me patience, Ya Allah. Give me patience. I need to tolerate this. And we can think about this in every aspect in our lives. That in reality, the dunya, because of its nature, we're going to have difficulties. It's natural that the physical world has problems. The body has illnesses. There's viruses outside. The virus wants to exist just like you want to exist. The tree wants to exist just like you want to exist. So the tree is going to exist, is going to grow, is going to consume oxygen, is going to give carbon monoxide or dioxide, is going to take carbon dioxide and give oxygen as well. That's the cycle of the tree. Is going to take nutrients from the ground. It wants to exist. We also want to exist. Animals want to exist. So there's a clash of everything together. Because the virus wants to spread, it goes into the human being, and it spreads from one human to another. Because the virus is also a creature and wants to spread as well. That leads to the sickness in the human being. It's the nature of the physical world that there are difficulties. If I want to walk from this point A to point B, I'm going to have to use my legs. This uses energy, uses my muscles, consumes my food that I just ate, so I have to eat again. It makes me tired, it makes me, I age as a human being. And with age comes problems. This is the nature of the physical world. So the Imams teach us that if you have problems that are not from your own hand, challenges that you go through that you are not the cause of. I'm not the cause of my aging. I can age better than other people, yes. That's what I should be working towards, to age in a better situation. That's what I have to, but aging itself, I cannot handle. Sometimes a war breaks out, or a flood happens because of the natural world, or because of shortcomings from us as well. Sometimes you have the government or the city, they don't build a proper dam, or they don't build a proper street, or they don't take care of the infrastructure, and a natural disaster happens and people suffer. Sometimes the suffering comes because of natural reasons. In that situation that we cannot control, that's where you ask for patience from Allah. Because that's a trial, it's a tribulation, you have to overcome it. Otherwise, mentally, you would go crazy. You lose family members, you lose your house, you lose your belongings. And if you have no insurance over there, for example, this is a very big calamity. So in that moment, you really need patience. In that moment, you have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you patience so that you stay sane and you stay normal and you're able to continue living normally. But the problems that we bring upon ourselves, this is something that Islam teaches us to push away. Don't put yourself in situations where you have to suffer and be miserable. Just because you're a believer doesn't mean that you have to be someone who's suffering. On the contrary, you have to be a happy individual. You have to be someone who's living a comfortable life. You have to be someone who is able to enjoy the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in this world for us. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To talk about this, we look at a hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He tells the people, فَإِنْ أَتَاكُمُ اللَّهُ بِعَافِيَةٍ فَاقْبَلُوا. If Allah gives you afiyat, gives you well-being, then accept it. Don't reject it. Some people think that if they have comfort, they have to reject it because this is contrary to a believer. A believer should never be comfortable. This is not true. The Imam says, if Allah gives you afiyat, then accept it. وَإِنْ ابْتُلِيتُمْ فَاصْبِرُوا. But if Allah tests you, then be patient. But at the beginning, if Allah gives you afiyat, gives you well-being, take it. Don't reject it. Say, this is from Allah. If Allah gives you something good to make your life comfortable and relaxed, take it from Him. I read from a number of different scholars in Qum. He was Allama Tahrani, a known mystic, a arif, one of the urafa, one of the spiritual scholars. He tells his followers that if you're able to buy a house, it's better than renting a house. Now, back over there in those countries, when you own a house, you really own it. Nobody can take it from you. You keep it. You don't have to pay the tax on it or anything. Here, if you don't pay the tax, property tax, it's gone, even if you made the full payment. But over there, if you buy a house, it means you don't have to worry about any more payments. It's done. You have a house, you can live comfortably in it. So at least if you lose everything, at least you have a home to stay in. So he tells his followers, it's better to buy and own a house than to rent one, and to own a comfortable house. Why? Because if you rent a house and every month your mind is occupied, how am I going to pay that rent at the end of the month? Once your mind is occupied, that's taking away your focus on other things. It takes away your focus on your prayers. It takes away your focus on your family. It takes away your focus on many other things, because every single day you have to think, I have to calculate my income, I have to do this, I have to do that to keep that money for the end of the month. Whereas if you buy a house, then you're able to free your mind from a lot of worries. You can sit down comfortably with your family because you know this house is yours. All you have to do is bring food to the table. So in one sense, he's teaching them that to live in comfort is better than living in discomfort, because then you're able to worship Allah better. You're able to focus on your prayer better. You're able to empty time and in your mind to focus on the divine. This is a teaching that we have to really think that, is it a good thing that I'm always occupied and worried about my life? No, it's not a good thing. Islam doesn't want you to do that. Ahlul Bayt didn't teach us to be like that. He taught us to be free-minded, to be empty-minded in a positive way, to be able to focus on our salat. In Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, in a famous hadith named Hadith of Unwan al-Basri, this man comes, his name is Unwan. He was an older man. He was looking for a spiritual master. So he goes to the Imam alayhi salam, and he asks the Imam to become his master. And the Imam tells him, you used to go to Malik bin Anas, one of the Sunni madhabs. It's Malikiyya. The head of that madhab, that sect, is named Malik bin Anas. This man used to go to him for teachings. So the Imam told him that I'm a busy man. I have a lot of dua I have to do. I have a lot of prayers. You're going to that individual, so just continue going to him. So that individual becomes saddened. He stops going to Malik, and he says to himself that if the Imam saw any goodness inside of me, he would have accepted me. He wouldn't have rejected me. So the man begins praying to Allah, and he prays to Allah to make Imam Sadiq's heart soften for him. He prays that, he says that once I saw Imam Sadiq, the love of the Imam came into my heart and is unable to leave from my heart. After I saw Imam Sadiq, I can't think of anything else anymore. I can only think of him. I want to go to him. I want to take his teachings. So eventually the man goes back to the Imam's door, and he knocks, and one of the servants comes out, and he asks him, what do you want? And he tells him, I want to say salam to the Imam. So he tells him that the Imam is praying. And the man then waits at the door. And after the Imam finishes, he comes in and he tells him, what's your name? And he says, my name is, what's your kunya? Abu Abdullah. His Abu Abdullah's name. So the Imam tells him, Thabbat Allahu kunyatak. May Allah preserve this kunya, that being a servant for Allah for you. So Unwan al-Basri said, if I only got that dua from the Imam, that would have been enough for me. That's enough for me for the rest of my life. Just that the Imam gave me this dua, prayed for me this prayer. So it's a long hadith. I'm not going to recite the whole hadith. But the idea is that the Imam begins to teach him not to occupy himself constantly in this world, to have time for himself to free his mind, to free his soul, to dedicate it to some knowledge, to dedicate it to living a life of what they call today mindfulness or awareness of life. This is very necessary for us, that we have to divide our portions of our day in a proper manner so that we're able to live a better life, a more comfortable life. Someone who sleeps at night with so much worry is not living a comfortable life. Someone who throughout the day or during his salat, this is a good test to see if we really are living the way that the Imams told us to live, is when we stand on the prayer mat. How many thoughts come to our mind? If our thoughts are very occupied and chaotic, that means that we're not really following the guidelines properly. Because we're not supposed to be thinking of anything in salat other than focusing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if this is how we are, then there has to be something in our lives that we need to change. There has to be something that needs to be improved, because we're meant to stand in salat focusing only on one thing. This means that we have distraction in our minds. We have thoughts in our minds that we have no control over. This is why our ulama, taking from the teachings of the Imams, tell us that the first thing that we have to do as believers is to gain control over our minds, gain control over our thoughts, what they call ta'irul khayal, the bird of imagination. They call it a bird of imagination because the bird jumps from one branch to another and never settles. And they say that our imagination, if it's not controlled, is like that. You close your eye for a second, and 1,000 thoughts race in your mind. You realize, when am I not thinking of anything? I'm constantly occupied, thinking about stuff. So that means that whenever you're doing something, you're never really focused on that thing. When I'm eating, I'm never really eating. I'm just moving my hands and putting things in my mouth, and I'm filling my body with this food, but I'm not really eating. Eating means that you're focusing on every meal that you're eating. The Imams say that one of the times where the angels don't write anything for the servant is during eating, which is telling us to take our time when we eat. The Imams taught us to chew our food 40 times before we swallow it. How many of us do that thing? The focus, when you eat, you have to focus. You really have to eat. And not only eating, anything you do in life. If your mind is constantly occupied with thoughts and there's no control over your mind, then you never really enjoy anything you do. You find that your whole life passed, and you look back and you think, when did I ever enjoy anything that I did? Even when you go on vacation, your mind is somewhere else. Your mind is like, all right, what will happen when I go back to work? What's going on at home? What's going on here? What's going on there? You're always thinking about something else. You're in salat, you're thinking about everything except salat. You're on a vacation, you're thinking about everything except vacation. Yes, you do have a little fun. You do enjoy a little bit. But really, are you 100% there? You're not. Why? Because the bird of imagination is jumping, flying from one branch to another. So the ulama say that we have to catch this bird and we have to put it in a cage so that it doesn't fly anymore. And they give us teachings that they took from Ahlul Bayt in order to achieve this state, to be able to focus, to only allow the thoughts to enter that we want to enter our minds. This is what they call controlling the mind. This is something that's necessary, and it's the first step that people have to do in order to improve their lives and become better at what they do and enjoy what they're doing more. So for example, tomorrow inshallah I want to speak about the other point in this letter, which is a lot of teachings, but another teaching that the Imam says, he says, alaykum bis-samt. You have to practice silence. He tells them in the letter. And I'll mention in the hadith tomorrow, I'll mention it now, just so you are aware of it, and we can repeat it tomorrow. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam tells his followers that the people before you used to learn silence just like you learn speaking. How a child grows up, you teach the child how to speak. He says that the people before you used to teach the people how to be quiet, not how to speak. Silence is a practice, it's a training. You train the mind to be quiet. And he said that they would train for 10 years, the Imam says. They would train for 10 years how to be silent. Of course, they weren't quiet the whole 10 years, but there were training, there were exercises. Like, if you go to yoga sessions or meditation sessions, you sit down in silence, right? That's part of the practice there. Well, the Imam is saying that these people for 10 years, they were trained and trained and trained how to control their thoughts, how to have silence. And then the Imam says, if they fail to be silent after 10 years, they will not worship. They will say, we're not worthy of worshiping. We failed the test. So the introduction to worship and proper worship is silence, is to be able to control your mind and to have control over your thoughts. Inshallah, tomorrow I'll talk about that as the first method or the first step to spirituality or to becoming a believer is to practice these things, is to have silence. Silence leads to the control of the imagination, control of the thoughts. And once you have mastery over that, then everything you do in this life will become 1,000 times more pleasurable. Your salat becomes a real salat. Your relationship with your friends and your family becomes a real relationship, because when you sit down and your friend is speaking to you about their problems, or a family member, your child is coming to you, or your sibling or your parents, and they talk to you about their problems, most of the time we act like we're listening, right? How much percent of focus do we have when these other people are talking to us? A person comes with their problem and is discussing their problem to us, and in our minds, we're somewhere else. 1,000 different other things are coming. He's talking to me about his divorce, and I'm thinking about, I want to go fishing this weekend. This is what's coming in my mind, right? A lot of times this is, you focus on and off, on and off, on and off. So that type of relationship never develops into a deeper relationship. You don't find that there's a strong bond between the individuals because your focus is not on the friend. Why isn't your focus on the friend? Because your mind is constantly running like a computer processor. It never stops. It's just running in the background. So silence allows us to control that. And once we do, we see that our eating becomes more pleasurable. You eat a burger after that and you think, oh my God, I've never eaten a burger in my life. This is the first time I taste a burger. Your conversations with people become much more meaningful. Why? Because when your mind is empty and you think about something, you're able to delve deeply into it. But when it's chaotic, you think about it on the surface level. Sayyid Ali Qadi gives an example. He says that the soul, when it's occupied with all these things, it's like the river, a murky water. If there's a river with sand on the bottom, and you play around with the sand, what happens to the water? It becomes murky. You can't see the ground anymore, right? He says the soul is like that. If it's so occupied with thoughts and imaginations and ideas, you can't see clearly anything. Everything to you is brown and murky. You only see the water on the surface level, but you never see the river itself and the bed and the ground. So he says that when you have control over your thoughts, it's like those sediments, they go down and they settle on the ground. And then you have clear water. Then you see everything. He said this is how the soul is. So once you're able to see everything, that's when you begin living a more meaningful life. You begin living a more valuable life. You start enjoying things more, whether they're things from this world or they're spiritual things. We're not only after salat the whole time. The Prophet lived, he married. He said that marriage is from my sunnah, from my acts. And whoever doesn't follow my act is not from me. He said that because there was a man who left marriage, he left the society, and he began praying day and morning and night, salat, 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 salat. So they complained to the Prophet. They told him, this man, he's not stopping. This guy's praying morning and nighttime. And the Prophet's not even doing that. If there's any person who's the real mu'min that you have to follow, it's Rasulullah, right? Why are you doing it? Like, are you trying to become more than the Prophet? If the Prophet's not doing that, obviously that's not what's required from you. So that's when the Prophet came and told the people that marriage is from my sunnah, is from my teachings. And whoever doesn't follow my teachings is not part of me. We're not asked to do namaz or prayer from morning to night. We're not asked to live a life in the forest or on the mountain and leave everything in this world. No. We're to engage in this life, to be part of this life, and to understand that prayer in our teachings is not the movements only. Because, the Prophet, when he saw a person praying so fast one time, and he says that this is like a chicken. You know how the chicken pecks on the ground? He said this salat is like the chicken, it's pecking on the ground. This is not salat, this is not prayer. This guy just moving his head down and up very quickly. So prayer is not just the movement. Prayer is a mindset. Prayer is when you're standing before Allah and you're focused on Allah. Sayyid al-Haddad is one of our very famous spiritual ulama. Shaykh Mutahari goes to him, and Sayyid Haddad asks him, he says, how do you pray? He says, I focus on the words that I'm saying. So Sayyid Haddad tells him, then when do you pray then? Right? He's focusing on the words, but he's not focusing on the meaning behind. He said that you have to reach a point when you speak to Allah that you're not focusing on the words, you're focusing on the person you're speaking to. Right now, when you speak to your friends, do you focus on the sentences that you say, or do you speak automatically? It's second nature, right? You don't focus on the words, you focus on the person you're speaking to. Why? Because the individual is in front of you, you feel their presence. So you don't think when I'm saying, oh, hello, how are you? I'm not thinking, oh, hello is a word that starts with H and things like that, and it means, it's a greeting. I'm not doing that. Hello, I'm telling my friend hello. I'm greeting that friend. Why? So because when we speak, we want the meaning. We want to convey something to the other party. So if in your salat you're focusing only on the words, then you don't feel Allah's presence in your salat. You don't feel that Allah is in front of you. That's why you need to focus on that. Now, the Shaykh, obviously, when he said that he's focusing on the words, we have to take gradual steps to focusing. Of course, we have to begin by focusing on the words. This is the first step. The Sayyid Haddad wanted to elevate the Shaykh to a higher level. That's why he told him that now that you finished focusing, now move beyond that. Now focus on Allah. But first, you have to have focus. A lot of us don't have focus. Most of us, especially me. If you talk to someone, always distracted. Right? They talk to you. If they go on for more than 10 seconds, that's it. You start hearing just the sound. Right? It's not words anymore. It's like, it's like you zone out. You go somewhere else. That's why my lectures, I cut them down to like 10 to 15 minutes nowadays, because as soon as I see, with the technology that we have, the clips, the 2 minute, 1 minute, 10 second. If a clip is more than 10 seconds or 30 seconds, that's it. You turn it off. I don't want too much. It's too long. 35 seconds? No. I'm not watching this. It's too long for me. So we've lost this ability to focus. Everything we want it to be quick and short. Even like I've seen advertisements, like 5 seconds on YouTube. A 5-second advertisement. It's crazy. On TV, we hated the advertisements because, you watch a movie or something, and the advertisement like 5 minutes. You have to sit there and watch that, 10, 15 minutes in advertisements. Now we can't focus anymore. So we have to train ourselves to focus. Focus is not something that comes automatically. It's a matter that requires training, and it requires from us to do exercise. Just like we train our bodies at the gym and we do exercise, the mind and the spirit also require exercise. And this is something that our ulama emphasize on, and we have to practice and implement in our lives. The last thing I'm going to talk about before ending the lecture is one very interesting hadith that I found. A man named Muhammad ibn Harb al-Hilali. He said that I heard Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala العافية نعمة خفية إذا وجدت نسيت وإذا فقدت ذكرت. He says well-being is a hidden blessing. If it's found, if a person has it, he forgets about it. But if it's lost, you remember it. As long as you're living comfortably, you forget that you're in this comfort state. But as soon as you lose that comfort, that's when you realize that you've lost it. That's why thanking Allah for afiyah or well-being is very important. Now, the hadith that I want to end with is this one here, Imam Rada alayhi salam. The Imam says, Yusuf alayhi salam, the Prophet Joseph, when he was in prison, he complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, "Oh Allah, what did I do that made me deserve going into jail?" We know in the Quran, in the story, Nabi Yusuf, he asked for it, right? He said that going to prison is more beloved to me than doing what they're asking me to do, the ladies. They were telling him to do a haram act. And the Prophet said that the prison is more beloved to me than what you're calling for me to do. So when he was thrown into prison because he refused to obey Zulaykha and the ladies in doing haram, they took him and they put him in jail. Yusuf alayhi salam in prison, he asked Allah, Ya Allah, what did I do? Why did you put me in jail? Why did you put me in this prison? Why couldn't you save me and put me in another place? Why couldn't you get me out of this problem in a different way? Why the jail? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies to Nabi Yusuf. He says, you're the one who chose the prison. I didn't tell you. So you said, Rabbi sijnu ahabbu ilay. You said prison is more beloved to me. I didn't choose the prison for you. You said that the prison is more beloved. You could have said something else. And Allah in this hadith, He says, if you said well-being is better, more beloved to me than what they're asking me for, then I would have given you well-being instead of the prison. So he's saying that you're the one who asked for the trouble. Why didn't you have a different opinion? I'm Allah. I can get you out of this problem in a different way. But when you ask for something and you think, that this is the suffering in prison is better than going through this, then that's what you're going to get because you asked for that. And the same thing in our lives. When we're wanting to choose something over something else, we always have to make the best choice. Allah, give me well-being. Don't give me trouble. Don't give me misery. I'm facing a problem. I might do something wrong. Don't say, oh Allah, take from my life and, put me in jail. I'd rather go to jail than do this. Why would you say that? Say, I'd rather live on an island, with a very comfortable life and no bills and nothing than doing this. Isn't that a better wish to make? It's a better wish. So this is a mentality that we have to have, and the Imams repeatedly focus to instill it in our minds. I said it was the last hadith, but no, it wasn't. There's one more that's related to tomorrow. So I'm going to end with this to connect it to tomorrow's lecture, inshallah. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says well-being is composed or comprised of 10 parts. Well-being is made up of 10 parts. 9 of these parts is in silence, except in dhikrullah. And 1 is in not sitting with people who are bad. 9/10 of well-being in life lies in silence. Inshallah, tomorrow I'll talk about silence and we'll try to understand why silence makes up 9/10 of well-being. Let us try to understand what well-being is, why silence plays such an important role in creating this well-being for ourselves. Inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight, I wanted to go over the movement that the ladies of Karbala, the family of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, had gone through after the battle of Karbala. And you know that after the Imam alayhi salam was martyred, and after his family members were killed, the ladies were left, and Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was also there because he was ill. He was sick and he wasn't able to fight, so he remained alive. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the imamah of these individuals to continue. So he was sick in that moment in order for his life to be spared so that he can continue. After the battle, the enemies, with all their harshness and evilness, took the ladies of Ahlul Bayt. They took them to Al-Kufa as if they were people who were non-Muslims. This is how they treated them. They treated them in an evil way. They treated them in a way that the lowest of the human beings is not treated. They took them to Al-Kufa as if they had no value. The 11th day of Muharram, they took them in the desert from Karbala, with all the difficulties and hardships and pain that Sayyida Zainab had to witness and the ladies of Ahlul Bayt had to see on that day. They lost all their loved ones. They lost the Imam of their time. They came back home and Al-Abbas is not there to take care of them. This is what they were suffering from. And these individuals, they take them to Al-Kufa and they enter the city of Al-Kufa. Once they enter, all the people come out to the streets because they see people that are tied in chains, ladies that are being dragged around in the streets in a state of sadness, and they see a spear in front of these people and there's a head on the spear. People are wondering, who are these and what are they doing here? So they begin asking, who are these people? Who are these individuals who are coming here? And the ladies reply, we are Ahlul Bayt. We are the family of Rasulullah. We are in shackles. You Muslims who claim to follow Rasulullah, this is how we are walking in your streets, and you did nothing to support us. And this is the head of the grandson of Rasulullah in a spear walking in front of you, and you betrayed him, and you never supported him. This is what happened. The ladies began crying on the streets, and the ladies of Ahlul Bayt said, what benefit is there in your tears right now? You were supposed to support us before this had happened. But this had happened because you betrayed us. You betrayed your Imam, you betrayed your own Prophet because of your fear of the evil oppressors. So then they're taken into the palace in Al-Kufa. And over there, the first thing that was taken into the palace was the head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on a spear. They brought it, and the army of the enemies wanted to show off with this head, that they brought back the head and that they defeated the army of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And at that point, when the head was brought in, Ibn Ziyad was standing there and he had a stick in his hand. And he began poking at the lips of Imam Hussein alayhi salam as if he was nothing in front of him. One of the companions of Rasulullah was standing there and told him, stop doing that. I saw Rasulullah kiss him on those lips. Ibn Ziyad got angry at him and told him, if you were not an old man, I would have had you killed over here. And he kicked him out. These are the lips that Rasulullah used to kiss. And now they're playing around and touching them and hitting them with a stick. And then they brought the ladies inside. They brought Lady Zainab alayhi salam, and the Lady Zainab stood on the side and did not stand in front of them because she was a woman of honor. But with all the calamities that she had, she stood and faced the oppressor with all her strength, and she did not show any weakness. When he asked, who was this lady that went to the side, he told her, this is Zainab. She would not respond to him. He repeated many times, and then they said, this is Zainab. So he told her, oh Zainab, how do you see what Allah did to your brother? And she said that Allah had written on them that they will die, and I see nothing but beauty that happened to them. And then Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Imam al-Sajjad was brought as well. And he told him, who are you? And he says, I am Ali ibn Hussein. He said, I thought Ali ibn Hussein was killed in Karbala. I commanded that Ali ibn Hussein get killed. He said, I had a brother also named Ali ibn Hussein, and he was killed by the people. He said, no, Allah had killed him. And the Imam told him, Allah takes the souls when they die, but it is your people that killed him. And Ibn Ziyad began becoming angry at that moment. And then the Zainab alayhi salam and Imam al-Sajjad began to speak. And that was the first method of them raising the awareness for Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam at that moment. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase our love for our Imams and allow us to stay blessed by keeping these majalis alive, and that the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are listened to and enter our hearts so that we apply them in our lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the Prophet taught us to ask, Allah, we ask you for well-being. We ask you to give us thankfulness for well-being. And we ask you thankfulness for well-being in this dunya and in the hereafter, inshaAllah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Hussein, Ya 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 Hussein.
حسین یا حسین ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کے ترجمان رسالت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا اگر ہے پانجتن پاک آیا تطہیر تو یہ ہے حرمت قرآن کی بولتی تفسیر نبی کے سینس پر ہے جو شاہ خیبر گیر تو ان کے نام سے قائم ہے مقصد شبیر حسینیہ کی نیابت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا برہن سر بھی رہی حق کی آبرو بن کر کہ اب ہے چہرہ اسلام پر وضو بن کر کہیں جو سجدے میں تو حق کی جستجو بن کر ہے آج دین کی رگ رگ میں اب لہو بن کر اذاں حسین اقامت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا جو پہنچی کر وہ بلا قید شام سے چھٹ کر پکار گنج شہیداں میں سب کو رو رو کر کہاں ہو میرے علمدار اور علی اکبر کہاں ہو قاسم مزتار کہاں علی اصغر سراپا سوگ ہے حسرت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا تمہارے بعد قیامت گزر گئی بھیا ہجوم عام میں ننگے سر گئی بھیا تمہارے سر کی قسم در بدر گئی بھیا سکینہ قید میں رو رو کے مر گئی بھیا بیان رنج جو مصیبت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زباں پہ ذکر بہتر ہے اور زینب ہے کہ شب کو خاک کا بستر ہے اور زینب ہے ہمیشہ ماتم سرور ہے اور زینب ہے ایک آنسوؤں کا سمندر ہے اور زینب ہے غم حسین کی فطرت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام حق کی تلاوت ہے اے زہرا خلوص دل سے یہی کی جیے دعا محشر کہ ہو ہر ایک کو دیدار کربلا محشر بلائیں روز پہ جو بنتے سیدہ محشر چڑھاؤں اپنے سلاموں کی ایک ردا محشر میرے کلام کی عبادت ہے ثانی زہرا کلام
یہ بچے کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے ہائے یہ بچی کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے چھائی ہے جس پر بے بسی یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے ہائے یہ بچی کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے ہائے یہ بچی کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے آتی ہے مقتل کی طرف آتی ہے مقتل کی طرف دیکھا ہے کیوں سوئے نجف دیکھا ہے کیوں سوئے نجف کیا اس کا دادا ہے علی کیا اس کا دادا کیا اس کا دادا ہے علی یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے ہائے یہ بچی کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے ہائے یہ بچی کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے آتی ہے جو روتی ہوئی صدموں سے جاں کھوتی ہوئی پڑھتی ہوئی ناد علی پڑھتی ہوئی ناد علی یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے کیوں اس قدر گھبرائی ہے یہ کسی کو لینے آئی ہے کہتی ہے کس کو یا بھی کہتی ہے کس کو یا بھی یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے یہ بچی کون ہے یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے کیوں رو کے جان دیتی ہے یہ کیوں سسکیاں لیتی ہے یہ کیا مر گیا اسے کا کوئی، کیا مر گیا اسے کا کوئی، یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے۔ کانوں سے کیوں خون ہے رواں، اف یہ تماچوں کے نشان، یہ ظلم اور یہ کم سنی، یہ ظلم اور یہ کم سنی، یہ تو سکینہ، نیند اس پہ شاید چھائی ہے، سینے پہ سونے آئی ہے، بابا کی ہے یہ لاڈلی، بابا کی ہے یہ لاڈلی، یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے۔ سینہ شہ والا کا ہے، کیا اسی کے یہ بابا کا ہے، جس پر یہ آ کر سو گئے، جس پر یہ آ کر سو گئے، یہ تو سکینہ، ہائے یہ بچی کون ہے، یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے۔ کوثر یہ مقتل کی فضا، تڑپا رہی ہے دل میرا، تاریخ ہے غم کی، تاریخ ہے غم کی تیر، تاریخ ہے غم کی تیرگی، یہ تو سکینہ لگتی ہے۔ یا حسین 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 یا حسین۔
متوجہ زیارت صلی اللہ علیہ یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکہ یا نبی اللہ، السلام علیکہ یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکہ یا فاطمة الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین، السلام علیکہ یا